want to play better golf? Of course you do. Well, here are 3 easy ways to do it. 1. Open your smartphone and look for the podcast app. 2. Open the podcast app and search Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan. 3. Subscribe and never miss an episode of great golf instructor interviews from around the world. A new guest every week, like David Ledbetter, Brian Manzella, Dr. Sashow McKenzie, James Siegman, just to name a few. Hear their insight as they deliver their wisdom of the game. Take control of your game. Subscribe today. Your game will thank you for it.
Craig, welcome to Breaking Par. I'm glad that you were able to stop by today.
Hey, Bernard, it's my pleasure. I'm really glad I found your podcast because there's a lot of great stuff in there.
Well, that's nice to hear. I'm glad that, and what's even better is that you as a listener, when I found out about you, to me, it's great to have the opportunity to have someone who listens to the show be a guest, because that's just that's going to come from a whole different perspective and more from our listener perspective as what you like in the show and things like that. I mean, the main thing we're really here to do, though, is to discuss what you do and how you're working to help grow the game and your contributions to the game of golf and how you're helping players better enjoy this game.
That's the whole purpose, to help people play better. So take some of the pain away if possible.
Sure. So you're very involved in putting, and when I saw some information about what you do, that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So tell our listeners a little bit about first, how did you get involved doing this? How did you come upon the method or the I guess the insight of the way that you're helping other players, and basically, like what type of students are you working with?
Well, mine came about as problem solving. I was an addicted golfer, as a lot of us are, years and years ago, and I was also a club builder. I got into the club building business because I was an addicted golfer. And I had a couple of problems playing. I was a slicer, and I had yips at a young age. And so this was really painful, but I wasn't going to let it beat me. And through my study of golf club dynamics and design, I studied first at Ralph Maltby's at GolfWorks years ago, and I learned about face angle then. And so the problems that I was having, since I worked on golf clubs every day, it was a process of finding out why certain things happened, what changed face angle, what controlled face angle, and all of this kind of filtered down and led to a way to control the face angle and stop these random motions. And so it allowed me to become a shot maker and be able to learn how to make the ball go right to left. And then also it's connected with the putting technique, and I became able to putt righty, lefty, upside down, all kinds of things, because I was able to control the club much better. So it was like a lot of things. The cure comes because there was a big problem. I had a big problem.
So then, really, that was so necessity is the mother of invention, and that's what made you start to investigate this more. And then also, as a club builder, you were educated in understanding face angle, lie angle, and fitting players and things like that. So you had that knowledge already built into you. So now you took that knowledge and looked at putting and how. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the main thing that you teach or that you work on is proper alignment. Is that correct?
Yes, it's all pre-shot alignment. It's dynamic pre-shot alignment as opposed to static pre-shot alignment. And this is it's similar to aiming a bow and arrow, where an archer is, if they're just shooting instinctively, they'll just pull back and aim at their target, pull back and shoot it. Now, the archers that are going for the bullseye, they're going to stress their bow and get torque into the system first and take the slack out of all these slack areas, and then they can aim the arrow. So what we do with my dynamic pre-shot alignment is we're taking slack out of the joints in the wrists, elbows, and shoulders, and we're connecting the whole body and the golf club as a single assemblage. So there's much less random motion available.
So then basically what this does is quantify all the motion and make parts work together more as a unit. And then, of course, in turn, helps build consistency and solid ball striking more often.
Yes, and this is not about the motion. When the swing is put in motion, that's for swing teachers to teach what is happening in the sequence there. But what we do is to prepare the body and the golf club for that motion, so that we just reduce the random possibilities.
Sure. So now when you teach this setup or this alignment to your players, is most of the time, are you working with all different levels of players? And then the other question that I have that's kind of attached to this is, are you doing most of this individually, or are you doing this in groups?
Mostly individually now. It does get a little technical, and so when you're doing with a group, there's a lot to learn and a lot to go over. So it is a little easier one-on-one. And I do have all levels of players. When I started out doing this, I attracted the attention of Steve Elkington, and he understood from my demo videos, he recognized something in there that resonated within him about his knowledge of motion and alignment. And so we started working on this in 2011, and we've been working ever since on it. He did have a couple of #1 rankings in putting on his last full year on tour in 2011. So there's all levels that I work with.
Okay, great. So let's just say that I came to you and said, I want to learn this. So take me through what would happen. Like what? So in other words, if I set up a time with you, and we met on the putting green or in a studio or wherever it is that you do it, give me a rundown as kind of how we would start this and what we would be talking about.
First thing we want to do is to learn how to control the lead hand grip on the club. We've got a lot of motion in the wrists. We can do supination, pronation, flexion, extension, and radial and ulnar deviation just in the wrist joint. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to stabilize your lead hand grip before you put it on the golf club. And then we'll also go through the entire procedure without a golf club so we can get into a good, stable address position without the weight of the club hanging off of your hand. So I'm going to get you into a nice, stable position that's removed the slack in the joints, and then also connected you through your body all the way down to the ground.
Okay, so then that's where we start. And so then once we have the lead hand kind of hammered out and ready to go, then what comes next?
Then we're going to connect with both hands, put the trail hand on, and then we're going to establish the stable arc, because that is the goal, to get a stable arc where the putter is going to track without worry about it going inside, outside. It's just on a much more stable track. And so that involves the rest of the pre-shot routine. And so you're going to be moving your entire body and learning that pre-shot routine.
Now, in the path of the club, and you just talked about how it tracks inside, outside, or whatever that may be. That's pretty much. Is there a specific path that you like to see the putter take, or is it more an individual thing where some players they like to have an arc where they come a little inside and a little inside? Some players they're more straight down the line. There's not as much of an arc. Are you an advocate of both? Or is there a specific one that you feel that you found has worked best in the method that you're using?
Well, when you remove the slack from the joints, the body is going to create a stable arc that will come inside, then on the line, and then inside again. And that's the same way it is with a putting robot, that's going to make an arc stroke because we're connected with our shoulders and we have the club in front of us. So when we remove the slack, there's really only a very small area that this arc that the club can travel off. If you want to try to push it outside of the arc, we stabilize this by the way the bone structure is and the way we torque the system. We're adding a little bit of torque. So it's a little bit like aligning the front end of your car. If you don't align the front end, the wheels are going this way. When you get those tightened down, they're going to be traveling on a steady track. And so when we remove the slack from these joints, then the putter is going to be traveling on a stable arc. And it may be different for different people with they're taller, shorter. They're going to have their own individual arc, but this really does give them their own fingerprint arc.
Helps them find their own arc and what's best for them. So, and this is kind of then on the side of biomechanically how the player works. Because I know that biomechanics is being more and more investigated, brought to the forefront now, which helps everyone be their own individual self that works the way their body works best. I know that I use it in full swing, and I also use it in putting. I think that the way that I use it in putting more than in full swing is more of how do they grip and what is their natural tendencies to grip, and then that kind of helps them get things a little bit more comfortable for them to be able to execute what they need to execute. I don't get overly, and that's why this interests me very much, because I don't get overly involved in biomechanics when it comes to putting. I do get a lot more involved in it when it comes to full swing and setup and things like that. But as we talk about this, because this is very, very interesting topic, as we talk about this, you said about the lead hand. Now, what happens with the rest of the body and biomechanically, and is there specific width of stance that is recommended? Is there specific postural setup that you find is imparted in this type of alignment?
Well, we find, speaking of biomechanics, we are a machine. We have movable joints, so we're a machine. So this is just answering issues that come up because we have these movable joints, and everyone's going to have their own slight difference in the where they're standing, but they will have a stable arc, and that's the arc is going to be a byproduct of what we do. So I don't tell them how to stand to create a certain result. We're making motions, pre-shot motions that are going to dictate to them where their stance is going to be. And once you're connected all the way from the ground up, you have this very stable feeling, and you can move it around a little bit, and We use a stance that's a little pulled off the line, so we open up the view, and that is all connected with small tensions in the body that take out that slack. So yeah, I don't tell people how to stand. I show them how to do these pre-shot motions, take the slack out, and then they're going to be in a good position.
Okay, so then once they do take the slack out, as you're saying, then you're finding that the bulk of those players, they have a slight open stance. Does that make them be able to keep the putter face, so that they're actually putting more where they're aiming because of that, or do you find that if they're square, or is it just a natural reaction as to the alignment procedure, as to what happens when they do the correct alignment procedure?
Yes, the big thing about aiming is that if you don't do dynamic pre-shot alignment before you aim, as you see, most of the technique that you see on tour nowadays is players will come down and they'll put their putter down behind the ball, meticulously on the line, and aim that putter first. We don't aim it until we've taken all the slack out. The aiming part is the last thing that we do, because we want to get all the bones, all the joints stabilized, so it creates this stable arc, and that's away from the line. And then once we get that stable arc created, then we'll dock up to the ball and then make some fine alignment adjustments with our entire body and to create our aim, and then we're ready to go. So it's really just the opposite of what you see on most tour techniques today, where they're aiming first and then they apply force to the stroke. And when you're applying force, if you haven't taken the slack out, you're vulnerable to all these little motions, and it doesn't take much. So, and it's like I said, it's like the archer. We're not aiming until we apply force to this bow and get it taut. Then we can aim it. So that's what we're doing with our body.
Okay, so then essentially, you run them through a series of setup, position, so that they can get in a good position, so that the lead wrist is addressed, and that the alignment of their body gets the slack out, so that they can make a solid, consistent arc with their stroke time and time again. And then once they have that done, and I'm assuming that they're behind the ball and set up and ready to go while they're doing this, then they aim to where they want the ball to go, correct?
Yes, and the pre-shot routine starts from behind the ball, and then as we approach the ball, we're doing motions to reduce the slack, and then get into the address position. And so once you learn this, it can be difficult learning this. You have little steps to go through, but it's like anything else. You have to get in your reps so it becomes comfortable. Once you get comfortable with this pre-shot routine, then you approach from behind and go through the pre-shot routine and address the ball. And so it all goes very seamlessly and naturally once you get your reps in and understand it.
Sure. Now, in a lot of conventional pre-shot routines, at least the ones that I use with my students, which I think are fairly conventional, there's a near field target that's involved. There's a target line that's involved. There's basically standing on that target line and picking that near field target, so that you know that you're aiming square to where you want the ball to go. Things like that. That's still involved in this particular alignment procedure, correct?
It is. It's just that we go further in stabilizing things before we get to the ball. But this is a pre-shot routine, not for the sake of routine, but every motion that we go through has a purpose. There's a pre-flight checklist, because we have all these variables involved, and we're going to account for all the variables in the joints as our pre-shot routine.
Sure. So, and I like the idea of a checklist. I know that with my students, I always have them run a checklist so that they're addressing the ball to create the shot that they want to hit at this moment. Not so that they're doing it as just a namby-pamby so they do the same thing every time. And that's kind of what's happening here then, I would assume. Yes?
Absolutely. And this technique applies beyond putting. It can be applied to chipping and full shots. I teach it as a putting technique because this is the simplest way to do this. We're not worried about lofts, trajectory, shots. We're not worried about shaping the ball. We're just going to have things that go straight. We want a putt that goes straight on our target line. So when you move beyond it, once you understand this, then you can apply this to chipping, pitching, and full shots. But then again, there's more to it because you have to understand the modern ball flight principles. We're well beyond the target line, square face to the target line, which everyone has been understanding that's what we're trying to do. Well, since TrackMan explained that's not what we're trying to do, we're trying to control the face angle in relation to the club path and the arc. And so with this DynAlign dynamic pre-shot routine, we can preset those angles for the type of shot we want to hit. So that's beyond putting. A lot of people want to take this technique and go to their driver right away. It's a little bit more involved than that. So, but we do factor in the modern ball flight rules, which is very important.
Now, is the only way that players can learn this dynamic alignment system is directly through you, or well, of course it would be directly through you, but I mean, does it have to be in person, or do you have information where they can learn that through maybe videos or through PDF files or things of that nature too?
I've got a lot of videos, a lot of free videos on this, and they're in the video vault in Steve Elkington's site. It was Secret in the Dirt. That was the original site. Now it's called Secret Golf. And in the video vault there, I've probably got 30 videos about this. And if you're willing to dig through there, you can learn how to do this just by investigating. I have some subscription videos on my website. People can sign up for 30-day access and watch videos in slow motion from the player's view and get really detailed. Other than that, it's just private instruction right now.
Great. Well, I mean, it's good that you have all those things available to players so that some of them, it gives them an opportunity to, if they want to find out about it, they can view some stuff. Then really, I always feel that the best way to learn anything is direct contact with the instructor himself, because there's things that you can ask them in the moment that you might not come up with those things or be able to write those things down and then send an email and things like that, because sometimes the mind works differently when you're in the moment and when you're in process and you're doing it one-on-one, face-to-face with someone.
And a lot depends on the background of a person. I have players who are, say they're bridge engineers or people that understand mechanics. They understand this much more easily. Some people are just not mechanically minded. They don't understand, or they just don't have the history of working with machines or something, and so it can be more difficult for them. And this is technical information, and so it can take some time to understand it. It's all perfectly logical in just a basic rule in mechanics. Anytime you want a machine to have repetitive motion and consistent motion, you have to torque down the parts. And so it's just a basic mechanical principle, but everyone takes to it in their own way. So
Sure, there's always an alignment procedure that's done, or a realigning of machines, or
Yes.
calibration, should I
Calibrate,
say?
yes.
And when you're doing recalibrating something and getting it prepared for a session, if it hasn't been recalibrated in a while, a machine, sometimes
Yes.
machines can keep that calibration for a while, but then they start to stray. Whereas us as human beings, our calibration probably strays from shot to shot just because of the nature of the beast. So then, if this method help is what I'm taking from all of this, is that it kind of is like it's like you're recalibrating on the
Absolutely.
fly as you're doing
Absolutely.
what you need to do, so that way it kind of syncs everything up, lines everything up. It takes, as your term is, takes the slack out of the joints so that they can work efficiently, and be calibrated to your personal body type and what you need to do. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Yes, and we do this before every shot, because once you make the golf motion, then the slack is going to be gone, and so we do this every time, and it goes very quickly. Once you learn how to do this, internalize it. It's just like it fits like an old pair of jeans. It's just boom, boom, and people think, well, this is very mechanical. Geez, you shouldn't be mechanical. Well, you're mechanical when you're learning it. Once you learn it, you're just playing the game. You feel this, and it's second nature. So
Sure, it's kind of like when I was a boy. I My first car was a stick shift, and I never drove a stick shift in my life. So in the beginning, there was a lot of jerking motion and things like that, and stalling, and worried about, oh my gosh, if I'm on an incline and uphill or something like that, of the car rolling back. And it felt very mechanical, and I really had to think about what I was doing. But once I started to get used to that, I was not focusing at all on that. I was focusing on checking my mirrors, making sure, looking at my surroundings, looking way ahead of me to make sure I could see what was coming up ahead, so I was prepared for it, things like that. So this is very similar to that, where once you learn all this information, it just kind of becomes second nature, and it just incorporates as part of your normal pre-shot routine. It's just you're doing a little bit of a different assessment than you might have before.
that's exactly right. And one other thing, we've one thing we've lost in golf is the waggle. Generally, you've got Jason Duffner is waggling, but you think back to the players, how Ben Hogan, how his waggle was a purposeful motion and involved the entire body, his pre-shot routine. And nowadays, even on full shots, you don't see much pre-shot motion when players are addressing the ball on full shots, and it's certainly not in putting. With putting, they're just coming up to the ball and just being very careful around it. There's no force getting added to the system. So I think it's, and that's what people expect it to be. They'll see this on television. These guys just men and women players, while they're addressing, they walk up to the ball and they'll stand up there quickly and get into their setup position, but there's really no torque being added to the system. If you're trying to control this club face that's traveling on an arc and it's rotating at the same time, I think it makes a little bit of sense to do some, before you're going to put this into motion, to kind of ensure that it's going to go where you want it to go. So, I'm bucking a big trend here where people just don't think there needs to be any kind of why would you waggle before you're putting? That's kind of just it wouldn't make sense to people. That's essentially what we're doing. We're doing these motions with our joints, and we're establishing a nice stable arc. And this is really more related to waggle than anything else.
Yeah, I always felt that the waggle was really a way for the player to relieve tension, and to get comfortable and ready to go. I think where it kind of got lost in some of the stuff was that some players, when they did a waggle, they would try to make that exact same motion on their takeaway, and some players, that waggle would be a breakdown of the right wrist, getting the club very much inside, and then as modern teaching has come about, they're trying to stay more on the plane and on the takeaway instead of getting the club real inside. So I think a lot of instructors have discouraged the waggle because it caused sometimes the wrong motion. And I think that if the waggle is used just as a tension reliever, it can work wonders. I think also if it's done, there's a lot of different ways to waggle. So a lot of different players believe that when they saw certain players do a waggle, that's what a waggle is and that's what you should do. But a waggle could really be anything that makes the player feel comfortable and gets ready right before they're ready to pull the trigger. I remember that Lee Trevino used to incorporate a couple of little steps in his waggle almost, where to get his body ready. It was like 1, 2, 3, go. And that kind of just made his body more dynamic and fluid to be able to do the shot.
And so we're not doing this motion to relieve tension, which is something that a purpose of a waggle. We're going much beyond this, and so it is motion, but it's not really a waggle. It's an advanced waggling, if you want to call it that.
Okay,
but
so
there's a lot more involved.
That's fine. So I just want to clear up for our audience, because when they hear waggle, they might think of a certain thing.
Yeah.
And then when you're saying waggle, you might be thinking of something that's not exactly that way, maybe a little bit different, but your term for that is still waggle. And in your mind, it still is waggle. So we just want to clear that up so that way they know. But the best way for them to find that out, I believe, would be to book a session one-on-one with you, or to at the very least go to your website and start to investigate this information that's going to help them get better. So how can our listeners do both of those things? First, how can they get to your site? What do they need to do? And then once they do that, how can they contact you?
The site is DynAlignGolf.com. That's DynAlign golf.com. And on there, there's some free videos to watch. Then there's a video subscription page where it's got about 20 videos in there. That it's a $10 for 30-day access to that. Then video could do Skype lessons also, and then also investigate the videos. If you just Google my name, Craig Foster, DynAlign Golf, and a number of videos will show up. A lot of them are in the video vault at Steve Elkington's site. And then I don't live far from Chambers Bay, so if players are coming in for the U.S. Open, people coming in, they can contact me, and we could set up a lesson here as well.
That's great, because I'm sure that there's a lot of people from all over the country who are going to be attending the U.S. Open, and this would be a wonderful opportunity for them while they're in town to stop by and learn this alignment type method. So Craig, thanks so much for taking the time out of your schedule to stop by and chat with us about what you're doing. And as we always say here in parting, till we meet again, try to keep it in the short grass.
Thanks a lot, Bernard. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Now you can take control of your game right now from your smartphone, tablet, or desktop. Just go to www.parbreakers.com/e-learning. That's www.parbreakers.com/e-learning. Your game will thank you for it.